What's going on, guys? Welcome back to episode 13 of the Up Podcast. Today we're very happy to be joined by Tom BlackLedge. For those who don't know Tom, he is a former UFC fighter. He is former coach and, well, I guess still current coach to Quinton Rampage Jackson. And he is also a successful author of the book Fearless by Design, which is a multiple-time bestseller. We hope you enjoy the episode. And as always, we want to give a big thanks to our sponsors for the episode. The Watcher & Co. Watches and LMS Corporation.
Some man they wanna chat shit till I knock 'em, ain't like I'm Jack Shaw. Rolls hat, rolls back, my flow sharp like a hacksaw.
So here we are then. Welcome to the Tanked Up 2.0 podcast. We are joined with MMA royalty. When we talk about old school, this guy is as old school as they come. The one and only Tom BlackLedge. Thanks, Tom, for taking time out to come on today. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm great, mate. Thank you very much. Thanks for a great introduction too, mate. My pleasure to be here.
So there's a lot of things I want to cover off with you. You know, I've known you a long time, and I knew of you long before I knew you. You know, on a personal level. So what we always start off on is like, how did you start this martial arts journey? You know, not only martial arts is the only facet you've got at the moment. We'll speak about your books and your public speakers go on. But first and foremost, you're a martial artist. You know, you were a fantastic fighter. When I looked at your record, I see your amateur debut was November 2001. The majority of the guys on the circuit today were either not born or not even thinking about fighting at that stage. So tell us a little bit about your background. How did you become involved in martial arts and your progression to becoming a fighter?
So I got into martial arts. Like I ended up getting a lot of black belts in different martial arts from being young. It just became this thing that I got into in my teens, and then pretty much became like a lifestyle for me. And it was that what led me into a lot of the philosophy and the things that I espouse a lot now, which I've always spoke about a lot. But obviously back then in the 90s. Doing martial arts, you were limited in what you were able to sort of learn from, when as you'll know yourself,
yeah.
Limited landscape. And in one of the PowerPoints that I deliver, one of the keynotes I deliver is I speak about martial arts magazines, and that being like a big part of the origin of going to these news agents, like places like Smiths and WH, what became WH Smiths too, and standing there reading them, because you couldn't quite afford to buy every single one, so you'd pick one magazine and like you'd read the other one for free and try and skim through it while you were there, so that's where like a lot of the influence was what I got. And then obviously I got into watching the UFC. Ended up buying them from a site which was like it sold all the Russian tapes, the VHS tapes.
Careful now, Tom.
I would buy them and watch the UFC things, and then start learning more about mixed martial arts. So it just transitioned from being, I think martial arts is interesting, but there's a lot of bullshit in it, isn't there?
100%, mate.
There's a lot of pretending of like the stuff. Like I learned a lot of things about jiu-jitsu, like that was applicable, that was transferable, but it had to be pressure tested a lot. And I was really lucky that I'd lived that life of martial arts for a long time, but then I was put in a position, because I was teaching martial arts from being really, really young. Like my sensei back then really gave me like a golden opportunity to live that life. Financially, it weren't rewarding, but it gave me the whole option to be inside. We had like a full-time martial arts school.
What was the first martial art you was doing?
Jiu-jitsu and kickboxing. And so in that school, though, then what we had was, we literally had it was a full-time martial arts school. It was a real forward thinker, really, to be fair, back in 2000. So with that, we had other instructors who would come in and they would rent the room and they would teach their classes. So because I worked in there and I ran the gym, I was teaching classes, but then I was able to join into a lot of other classes. So I had like a judo sensei who I was close with, and my original sensei, but then I would have the opportunity to train with a lot of different kickboxing classes, karate classes, taekwondo classes, and it was like I very much, being young, I really appreciated Bruce Lee a lot. I was a big fan of Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan, obviously, you know, all that kind of martial arts movies.
Yeah, or the movie genres as well, wasn't it?
Yeah. From back then. But the Tao of Jeet Kune Do was a book I used to reference quite a lot when I was young, and it was always about taking what's useful and discard what's not. And so I really employed that in the stuff of me learning. So I'd go to Taekwondo, and not to offend any Taekwondo players or martial artists, but a lot of it is useless in a fight. But there's segments of it what's extremely useful. So it was being able to differentiate between that's something I can take and learn from someone and use, but yeah, I want to omit 80% of the other stuff because it only works within that rule set of what you're doing. Similar to like what's happening with jiu-jitsu, I think, really. And a lot of jiu-jitsu is good for jiu-jitsu's sake, but originally jiu-jitsu was meant for fighting and for valetudo. And it's like, if you don't play jiu-jitsu while someone's playing jiu-jitsu, it negates a lot of the stuff that a lot of the new sports stuff is practicing, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree there. So when you said your first starts was kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, I'm guessing back then, them days of traditional jiu-jitsu,
yeah,
an element of the ground game. So this gym you're talking about, was this where you then started your MMA career? Because what you've just said here about taking facets out of different sports, that's pretty much in essence what MMA has become, hasn't it? It's taken all the positive parts of kickboxing, karate, judo, wrestling, boxing, jiu-jitsu, and put them into a format which is probably the most effective fighting system on the planet at the moment.
Yeah.
You know, was it that gym, or did you move gyms when you decided, look, I'm going to give this MMA a crack?
No, so I was still there. I was still at this gym, but I was a black belt by then already in a couple of different sports. I'd spent a long time training judo and jiu-jitsu and kickboxing. But it's obviously as you know, the landscape is so different now, like to what it was then. It was very much about like just constantly trying things out. But I had a lot of friends who were doormen around town, and it was back when the doormen were like
proper doormen.
Yeah, you know, and they used to come and I'd have fights with them, and we'd have fights in the gym. But it was like they became my friends, and then they became my students because I was practicing these things. So like I'd watch on videotapes, like the Gracie tapes, and all these things that you could try and get on mail order and buy to try and learn from. And I'd watch fights. I'd watch the fights, and I'd be like, "What's he doing here?" That, you know, watching guys like Pat Miletich and Carlos Newton and these guys, and I'd try and study what they were doing in the fights and be like, "This is something." Like I still do this now because I don't really watch fighting because I enjoy it, if I'm brutally honest. There's very few stars that I think I really enjoy watching them. There's a handful of people that would make me get up early morning and watch. But I watch it as a coach because I'm still so heavily involved in it that I need to keep up with the trends. So I'll still watch, I go, this is what's happening. This is like, there's a big emphasis because one thing that you can tell is history always repeats. In everything in life, history always repeats. And in MMA, it's no different. There's always cycles of stuff happening. So like I'll watch it like that, and I'll still take a lot of the facets that are happening. Like if wall work, the cage work's becoming really predominant, I'll notice that and start adapting my coaching to sort of keep with give it. So I used that a lot back then. I would just try and pick up notes, and then I started scrapping with the door lads who became my students and became some of my closest friends. They then later on became my training partners because I was just put in a good position where we had this academy, this school of martial arts that led me the opportunity to train and learn a lot. Which then after a while I separated from there because they weren't into that kind. They weren't into, if you remember, like, to say it now, a lot
it was
of people,
frowned upon, wasn't it, with some of the traditional instructors?
Upon,
yeah.
Like to go and like for like a lot of my fights, I would just go on my own. I couldn't even drive. So I'd have someone just take me, and I'm like, I just want to try and see if I'm good at this. How do I cope with the pressure? You know, Fearless by Design, it speaks about being afraid of going competing. That's the whole point. It's like these things that you're afraid of. It was me pushing myself through these things of being afraid and not knowing. But in martial arts, traditional martial arts, it was so frowned upon, weren't it? No one wanted, because they didn't want to actually pressure test the stuff, because they'd been, a lot of the traditionalists had been kidding themselves that it worked.
A lot of them were fearful of being found out as being fraudulent, really, wasn't it? Because a lot of the stuff, you know as well, you know, you've been on the circuit a long time. A lot of the stuff that they were teaching is great on a compliant compartment. It's never going to work in a real situation, you know? And I think that's the benefit of like jiu-jitsu and MMA, is we're constantly sparring, constantly pressure testing. You know, you don't have to be killing each other, but you soon find out what works and what doesn't work. But I agree with you. Going back to the early 2000s, everybody, whether it was kung fu, karate, taekwondo, felt that their art was the best, and were very narrow-minded, weren't they?
That's what the Gracies initially first blew up on. As well. Before the UFC, they were known for the dojo storm. You know, they'd go and take out the karate guy, or go and take out a judo guy or an aikido guy, and obviously that was the initial bit of fame they had, and then that's what led them to then sending obviously Royce into the UFC.
And the proof was in the pudding there, then, wasn't it? You soon found out when Royce Gracie done that first ever UFC war, what was actually effective in hand-to-hand combat.
Well, I think that's the thing. Like I'll say this to a lot of people: you don't know what you don't know, do you? And until someone grabs you who's done a lot of wrestling and jiu-jitsu, people, like, I'll play with people sometimes when I'm just messing about and being playful with them, and then like even friends who don't do any grappling arts or martial arts, and then they just think, "What's going on? What are you doing?" And because a lot of men, and I don't say this with an arrogance, so I don't want to offend anybody when I say it, but when you're used to wrestling someone for all your life, when you grab someone who's never wrestled before, it feels totally different, doesn't it? And it's like,
it is mind-blowing. Like, you've probably had it in your career, Jackson, as I've had that first ever experience of that feeling helpless. Do you know what I mean? I've spoken about mine many times as a lad that still trains me, and I remember jumping on the mat with him, no real understanding of grappling, and like after 3 minutes he must have submitted me 4 or 5 times. I'm blowing up my ass, I'm exhausted, I'm shaking with the adrenaline's going, and it was such an eye-opener to me of like, Christ, that's fighting. Do you know what I mean? I'd been training judo, karate for like 10 years solid, and it was like, Jesus Christ, what have I just experienced there, you know? And as you said, that can make or break you as a person, Tom. You're either going to be that type of martial artist who's going to go, right, I'm going to leave my ego at the door and I'm going to walk through the doors of this new place and learn this art, or you go back to your comfort zones training with your traditional instructors, just going through the motions.
That's what happened with a lot of them. They just put their head in the sand and they were like, I don't want to know about this.
I want to touch on your first fight was November 2003, I believe. Yeah, have I got that right?
No, it was before then. It was. So I had a few different little scraps, and then I'm not the best on dates, but I think it was either 2000 or 2001, and the most memorable one was John, which I think that was 2001.
Yeah.
So it was a bit before that, but
what I was going to ask you is, like, obviously you've got a successful team in now. When your fighters, your fights on Cage Warriors, which is a fantastic production. What's your views on 2025 when you're walking out as a coach, overseeing how these shows are running out, to when you got your feet wet back in 2001? It's night and day, isn't it? What was your experience like?
Right. So I'd say I've had the pleasure of literally walking out to like 100 people at a small show.
Yeah.
To walking out with Rampage when he fought the UFC championship in Vegas or wherever, and all these shows. And people think MMA is massive, but it's not. It's not all that big, really. When you're in it and you've seen it become what it is, you just see these select few stars who bring millions of people to it. People like Conor McGregor who just blow the sport up, and they bring a lot of new fans to it. But then, I mean, I know there's a lot more money in the sport, but yet how many fighters are still struggling because they're not getting anything? And
I think 99% of fighters are in that position, if I'm honest, Tom, and they. Do you know what I mean? It's only the the fortunate ones that get through to the UFC. And what's the roster in the UFC at the moment, Jack?
I don't know, 700,
You know,
maybe 700.
700 fighters out of a worldwide population of how many billion? There's not a massive percentage of guys making a really good living out of it, is there? And, you know,
But and how many of them 700 and something are making a good living?
Yeah.
A lot of them guys are still working. And
I can't remember which fighter it was. He put a post up, and he travelled to the UK to fight. He travelled to America to fight. So he was on 12 and 12 was his contract, $12,000 and 12,000.
Yeah.
So he's had to pay for 2 extra flights and a hotel for his 2 coaches. He put that down. That was something like £1,500 for the flights, another £700 for the room. Then he got charged 30% tax by Vegas.
Yeah.
Then expenses while they were out there and everything else.
management fee.
What's that?
And a management
His management fee had to pay 20% to a manager, and then
20% to a coach.
and he'd lost the fight, so he cleared. You know, if you're taking 30% off, less than $9,000, take out of all them extra, and he cleared something like £1,200. He said, like, I spent that on my camp, so I'm in deficit for my first ever fight in the second ever fight in the UFC.
And I think that's most fighters. And
yeah, I agree, mate.
And I'm not having a go at the UFC as such. I do believe that they should be rewarded more for fighting, for sure. And I understand that you have to promote yourself. You have to be involved in promoting yourself and doing all the things yourself. Everyone everywhere, no matter what you do, everyone's self-employed.
Yeah.
You know, but I think it's so difficult. And I do think this is something that a lot of coaches that I see now, as you know, you've coached for a very long time, and you've built a lot of good people up. And part of that is being a good role model and a person who they know they can trust, who'll be honest with them and tell them the truth. And I find sometimes there's a lot of coaches who speak a bit of bullshit and will, oh yeah, you could be amazing, you can be that, you could, and they live this life for too long trying to be something, to achieve something that, because we've seen it and you go, do you know what, that's not the end of the rainbow, this bit, like, you know, this task of being a fighter, it's a Sisyphean task, right? You're going to be pushing that boulder all day, and but that's where the joy is. Don't be thinking that you're going to reach the UFC and it's going to be all gold and glory, because for 99.9% of fighters,
agreed,
it is not, you know.
No, I totally agree. Going back to yourself and your career, you were part of the Wolfsley gym for many years, and me and Jack were talking about this before we come on here. Probably the first super team, really. You know, you see them in America, but definitely in the UK was the first super team to come to these shows. You had like yourself, Bisping, Rampage, you know, lots of big names training in there. Lots of names I could reel off that you would know and Jack would know, but you know, your casual fans of today probably wouldn't, that were big names at the time. How you want to talk about a little bit how Wolfsley came together, and like Bisping's been quite vocal on it, hasn't he, in his book, about the pluses and the downsides that he had there. What was your experience there, like, you know, at Wolfsley?
So Wolfsley, I'm dead fortunate that I was able to find the Wolfsley. I was the first fighter for them. So what happened is, as the gym was opening, before the gym was opened, I was teaching someone, and he lived in Warrington, and he knew the owners, and they were saying, oh, they're opening this gym. And so there was a guy called Kazeka Muniz, a black belt. He'd fought on Too Hot to Handle and things like that. He'd spent a lot of time over in the Netherlands. And he was coaching, he was a black belt, and I went up. I arranged it so I could go up. I travelled up there and got a session with him and trained with him. And then I ended up meeting the owners. But I trained with him, and he was really surprised at my level, my jiu-jitsu level, and grappling. So then I ended up becoming the first fighter on the team. Became close with them all, but it was interesting. It was an interesting time. There was an interesting group of people. Like you say, it was a super gym. There was nothing like that at the time. I still don't really think there's been much like it now, to be fair.
No, I would agree with that, yeah.
I still don't believe there's much like it now. But, you know, it certainly had its bad moments. You know, as a coach now myself, I think there's a lot of things that could have been done massively different, massively better. but it was what it was at the time. And
Why did it fold, Tom? Why did it end up close? You know, because
just first, I wanted to ask as well. Obviously, when the Wolf said was about training, and I think people's mindset on training back then, I'm probably right to say it was a little bit different. Whereas now everything's a little bit more, take care of yourself. Don't leave your best days in the gym. I can imagine back then. I mean, you was exactly the same.
Yeah.
Where training was a little bit more.
It was a lot more
brutal
physical,
and
wasn't
physical.
it? Brutal, yeah.
Obviously, being in a super gym, as we just said, with guys like Bisping, Rampage, all these big names, I can imagine that that some of those sessions would have been a little bit tasty, a little bit sometimes probably a little bit worse than going in there and fighting for real. But what were some of those days like where you're preparing for fights, or some of the bigger names are preparing for fights, and you're more than likely going to war every day?
yeah, it was a bit stupid, really. I look back and I'm like, we shouldn't have been doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
Hours and hours in a day of training. It was always the mentality of more is better. But that's probably why I've had so many surgeries now. And
Yeah.
and I think there's a fine line between going hard and it being, it giving you your rewards, what you need.
Yeah.
Like I think if you're an amateur guy, like there's a lot of talk about sparring and not sparring and going. If you're an amateur guy, if you've only had 8 amateur fights or something like this, you've not been experienced, you need them moments of having hard spars, because you don't know what it feels like. You don't know if you actually want to do it. But then I think when you've hit that point, I think you're getting diminishing returns, and you don't work on good skill acquisition when you're afraid too much of having.
Yeah, people shut up shop, don't they? I've seen it. I'm constantly on about this in the gym. Is you're not getting the best out of the session when you're going that hard. Your opponent is like folding a little bit and rolling over, as I call it.
Yeah.
I think, as I agree with you, that the hard sparring is important, but it doesn't need to be every day. I think like one hard session a week is what our ethos is, isn't it? We wrestle hard, we grapple hard every day, but for the actual contact of the head, like we've always kept it like one hard session a week, just going on the science and feedback from the PI that we've been fortunate enough to work with. We had those guys come in, and we had a company come in, Tom, for like 6 months, give all the fighters gum shields with these chips in that they're using in the NFL.
Right.
And they'd done all the stats. And in that entire 6-month period, we never had one fighter take a concussive blow, which I felt was testament to how we're training. And our record speaks for itself. So I don't think there's something that, the hard sparring every day, which some of the gyms are still doing in the UK and around the world. But as you said, I think you're getting less out of it rather than more, because the damage, you're losing years as Jack just said, losing years in the gym rather than in the ring,
Yeah, for sure. For what?
Yeah. For what? He sent me a good video the other week of Volkanovski preparing for Lopez. And it says, prepare to beat your opponent. Don't prepare to try and win in the gym. And it's a great analogy, I think.
Beat your opponent, don't beat the room.
Don't beat the room,
Right.
beat the opponent. So put yourself in bad positions.
I think that's important too. When you look at guys like Jack, who's got the tenacity and the toughness, but is highly skilled, that's like an important part that a lot of people are missing in MMA, that it's like skill acquisition. You've coached Jack, and Jack's trained that well, that he's got a really high level in all facets of combat, hasn't he? Which is important. Skillfully, he could teach all them things. I think a lot of people cover that up with toughness sometimes.
Agreed, yeah.
It won't last you in martial arts then.
No, at the highest level, the skill set's soon going to find you out, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
Just one. So obviously you've got a great relationship with Rampage. For some of the viewers in Norway, he came to Wolseley. You've done a lot of coaching with him, and I remember when he was a head coach at the Ultimate Fight, he brought you in as the wrestling coach. Yeah. Ultimate Fighter, what was that experience like? I can imagine that's quite an intense, particularly with somebody like Rampage.
Especially his season.
His season, there was a few doors that came off the hinges, wasn't there? If I remember rightly.
I think that was one of the best seasons, to be fair.
Yeah, was it Rashad? It was him and Rashad, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was good. It was really good experience. I was blessed to be on there. It's difficult, really, because you're coaching to a point. I have this thing where I'll speak about coaching, and there's like an instructor, there's a teacher, and there's a coach. And I think a coach is like limited to who you can coach properly, because you've got to take time and you've got to find what's in that person and help them find it themselves, you know, and lead them to it. So on The Ultimate Fighter, I weren't really coaching, I was just teaching.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Saying, do you know what? This will help you if you can do this. Or because the fight within a week they're having a fight and you've only seen them twice. You know, you don't know who they are, and the timing of the show back then, I don't know what it's like now because I haven't watched it in a long time. But you wouldn't know the position. Like, it might seem like it's been 3 weeks on the TV show, but it had been 2 days.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know, the timing on that kind of TV show is a bit off, and but the experience itself was brilliant. Like,
enjoyable. Yeah, it was good.
Really enjoyable. Yeah, going. You know, you're there most of the time. You're there like twice a day, every day at least. So you're traveling about to the gym, to the set. I remember thinking, there's no way I could do it if I was living inside that house.
Yeah, on me.
No way.
What's going on, guys? Just a quick break from the episode to thank our sponsor for today. Today's episode is sponsored by The Watcher & Co. The Watcher & Co is a trusted watch dealer who specialise in buying, selling and trading luxury timepieces. Whether you're looking for a rare collectible or looking to sell your watch for top value, they're there to provide expert service at unbeatable prices. You can contact them on Instagram or via email, and if you do so today, you'll be able to browse their collection or get a free no obligation appraisal. You can get in touch with these guys on Instagram at The Watcher & Co, or you can contact them for a quote on buying, part Xing, selling your watch, whatever it is, at thewatcherandco.outlook.com. Please show these guys some support because they support us, and we'll put a link to their Instagram and their email in the description below. We also want to give a big shout out to our second sponsor of the day. We're sponsored today also by LMS Corporation. LMS Corporation ensures a seamless experience for buying your new vehicle and providing an efficient vehicle brokering and logistics solution service. From purchase to delivery, these guys do it all, dealing with some of the highest, biggest clients in the country, from professional footballers to successful businessmen to your average Joe. So get in touch with these guys and show them some support, guys. You can get in touch with LMS via email, and that email is booking@lmsc.uk. We'll put a link to their email, their website in the description below. Or for any more details, obviously get in touch with us and we can forward you on to them. Please show them some support because they're supporting us. And let's get back to the episode. You obviously fought, Tom, at the highest level, but also have coached at the highest levels, and especially obviously being in the corner for Rampage, 4 fights like the Rashad fight and something like that. That's as big as it gets in terms of, you know, Rampage being the original, in my opinion, big pay-per-view star, the big draw for the UFC. How do they compare in terms of nerves on fight day, nerves for the walkout? Is there a big difference between fighting on the biggest stage to coaching on the biggest stage? Or because not many people obviously get to say they've done both. You kind of either fight in the UFC or you coach in the UFC. Not many guys.
You're one of the few that's blessed to have done both. So what are the different? Obviously, I suppose the magnitude of a Rampage main event compared to obviously, you know, fighting on a fight night or fighting on a UFC undercard is a little bit different. But how do you weigh up the two experiences in comparison?
Yeah. So when I got to the UFC, you know, I've never really spoken about this that much, but I think you'll get this. I think you'll get this, Jack, too, a lot. That when I got there, I was a bit done. I'd had so many injuries. I'd had a fracture in my neck. My arm had stopped working. I had a pull-up disc. So before the UFC, I was fighting for M1. And I was traveling about, and I'd seen this doctor, and he was like, your neck's in a mess. You could do with having this surgery. So it really put stuff back. And then when I signed with the UFC, it was still ongoing. And I ended up signing for 2 fights. And then I'd see this doctor and he'd say, you can't fight. So it got postponed. I was due to fight someone else. And then I was due to fight at the O2 or wherever it was at the time. I can't remember, like somewhere in London when they had the London card in 2010. And I had to pull out. And then by the time I did get to fight and I was there, I was like, I don't know if I can keep doing this anymore.
Yeah, the body's shot.
You know, and I'm just trying to push through these camps. And it really altered my opinion of when I walked out to fight. I was a bit like, I don't know if I want to live this life anymore. And you start feeling that, and I knew I couldn't push through that anymore.
That that's the time to walk away then, is it? So that was behind your retirement, Tom. It was just like a build up and a catch up of injuries and
I was
trying to
just,
get the recovery. How old was you when you retired, Tom?
I was 30, was I?
Yeah,
Yeah, something like that.
same age as you, Jack. Same age as you.
Yeah, I just got injured, and then it was like, but then walking out was a little bit different because my mind frame. I was still really upset at the time because I was confused. I didn't know what I was doing, and um, yeah. But walking out coaching now, coaching is different. Now, Shaky, you'll get this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Depending who you're with and that relationship, like everyone you coach, you're invested in. But I would bet for certain when Jack walks out to fight,
Yeah.
there's a different feel because
I think emotionally for me, it was a strain. The happiest man in the room when he retired was me. Because
yeah,
it's not like sending just your fighter out. You're sending your son. He's my baby, my little boy growing up. That fatherly instinct was outweighing the coaching side of it all too often for me, and I would struggle with the stress of it.
yeah,
Whereas, don't get me wrong, when the bell goes, he's the first to say I can switch it on, but the lead up, I was a hindrance to him on the lead up to the fight, if I'm honest, because I was nervous. I'd be dry reaching. I'd try my best to stop it. It's just nothing I could do about it. Whereas I've got a little more of a professional cap on when I'm going out with the rest of the team.
yeah,
The ethos, the prep, they have the same attention to detail that he has, but it's just like my nervous disposition is a lot worse when I'm with Jack than, as you
yeah.
said, because
I
it's the
mean,
emotional side and everything
the
else.
caliber is shown, isn't it, in your lads?
Yeah, yeah.
Known for as long as I've known you, the team's been known as
You know, we've always been a busy, successful team, and Jack will tell you now, we got a crop of youngsters coming through now. And you've seen it in your place, Tom. These youngsters are coming through because they're doing it everything from such a young age now. It's terrifying, Jack, isn't it? I got 16, 17-year-olds there that and again, I never name names no more because we've done it so often and they fall off the wagon when they're 18, 19, 20. But as long as they maintain their application to training that they're doing now, I think we've probably got 5 or 6 UFC stars, not just fighters,
yeah,
coming through on the conveyor belt.
yeah. I imagine I would struggle. Like, there's a definite difference in feel because for all of the guys, whenever I've cornered any of them, because I'm close to all the people I coach, because I think you have to be to
Yeah.
get. I don't have like 70 fighters because I couldn't coach 70 fighters. I couldn't do them justice and help them become because it's about more than just teaching them fighting, isn't it? It's about
Agreed, mate. Agreed. You
um,
know, I always say, I'd imagine you are the same way. I don't want the best fighter in the world if he's an asshole.
no,
You've got to be a well-rounded individual if you're going to be successful with us because I got no hesitation if I'm dealing with some dick and he can be the most talented fighter on the mat, but if he's bad for the team he goes, it's as simple as that. I'd have no hesitation on that because I do think that through you and me we're both old school, mate. We've been doing this a long time, and I think our approach to martial arts is probably a little bit different to the new generation as much as it's an important life tool, and that's which we'll touch on in a minute with your books and your tour in the country at the moment, delivering mental well-being talks. But I do think martial arts is a key facet in producing good human beings if you can get the right people.
you think that's an experience thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, like a hindsight thing.
Yes, I do. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I do sometimes think about that question in that, you look at the guys who do the martial arts, they always become not always, obviously, but predominantly become good men and women and good people, and they carry themselves and they get into development and they grow because of the philosophy of martial arts, really, which is taught to the people like us who were in martial arts. They were always taught the philosophies of it as well. I think it's quite an important point in doing
I do. I worry because we've been to some of these kid shows. You've got 10-year-old kids acting
I was just
like Conor McGregor, in a no-head shop out. It's embarrassing,
I do think a little bit though that the old school philosophy. So I'm obviously 30 now, and I grew up in traditional martial arts, kickboxing, traditional jiu-jitsu. You two are obviously the same, but I think what we are starting to see today is that the 9 and the 10-year-old kids, where I was growing up watching it as an old school form. So you got even though it was before my time, I grew up watching the UFC ones with the Gracies, and you watch the Gracie documentaries, and they talk about, embodying the martial arts and making it a lifestyle. It's not just about this and that, and people like GSP back when I was a youngster, 15-year-old, he was the role model everyone was looking up to. As I find now a little bit, the 9 and the 10-year-olds are currently looking up, and all they have grown up watching is Conor McGregor.
Yeah,
and
you're Sean O'Malley's.
What Conor McGregor, as great as Conor was for the sport, I think he also led to 4 or 5 years of everyone coming through trying to be the next Conor McGregor, which involved, the antics that come with it.
Yeah.
You see him out partying, so everyone thinks it's all right to go and party. You see fighters getting into fights outside the gym. Everyone thinks, oh, that's all right, that's allowed. So I do think that it's at a bit of a crossroads where the newer generation are going to kind of have one idea on it or the other.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the new school coaches as well didn't necessarily grow up in martial arts. I think they grew up in an MMA gym where everyone, again, is trying to be Conor McGregor. So they don't necessarily have the same philosophies as us, whereas, it's about being, not just about being a good fighter, but it's about being a good human being as well, like trying to walk away from situations if you can. Whereas, you watch, and I love Conor as much as the next one, but you watch Conor at an award show, throwing drinks and booting
Like
off.
a fight machine gun, Kelly.
It kind of like okays it then for
yeah, and that's a really good point. But that's a good point.
I think as well, though, there, Jack, you're right. Well, you're 100% right, and it's also the thing of you're like super respectful, like really respectful. Carry yourself like a martial artist because you are. Because as well, you've had someone who's instilled discipline and said, "Oi, these behaviors aren't acceptable." If ever you were to step out of line, I'm sure your dad would have gone, "No."
Yeah, of course.
Right. A lot of coaches won't do that because they haven't been where the old school coaches have been as such. They haven't done the things. They haven't been and fought. They haven't been and experienced these feelings. And they think the only way that I can get something is if this guy's the next Conor McGregor or the next superstar.
Yeah, I think you're bang on there, Tom.
And they allow this behavior to happen because they think maybe I'll get my time to shine through this person. Like it's like you're talking about the kids at these events and you're going, this is embarrassing. That's not a martial artist. You're not learning here. You're walking about and you're in some sports hall. Like my kids don't really compete that much, the kids that I teach. I love teaching the kids because I get to instill a lot of little mindset teachings with them. And I know it stays with them for a long time because I've seen them when they become young men and young women. And they speak to me about it, but they might not fight. They don't fight. Very few of them ever want to go and fight. But sometimes I'll let them compete for what it makes of them. But a lot of the time now, you take them there and they're going against kids who are training 2 times a day.
Yeah,
living that life. And I'm thinking, at 20, you won't be doing this.
No,
because
you can't. You cannot. And for me, a lot of the problem these days is parents living through their kids because you cannot get through to these parents that, listen, he's a 12, 13-year-old kid. If you want him training twice a day now, he's probably going to need a new ACL and a shoulder reconstruction at 18, 19, 20,
Yeah.
But because, like you said, they have these grand visions of he's going to be the next Conor McGregor and he's going to do this and that. Oh, it's going to make me famous. I'm going to be a byproduct of it. You can't get through to the parent and you can't get through to the coaches either. Like we've been at shows, where you see I've seen, I won't name the show or the coaches, but I've been at an event where 2 full-grown men are going to have a fight over the result of a 13-year-old against a 14-year-old, no headshot fight. And I'm sort of stood there thinking, why it's a glorified grappling match. It's not even a real fight. And what does it mean in, whatever we always say to me, like, I couldn't give a fuck who the 13-year-old and the 40-kilo yellow belt world MMA champion is because by the time,
who knows? Nobody knows.
Because by the time he turns 16, guess what? There's going to be another 3 of them.
Yeah.
Because everyone.
I did a post about this. I'd been at I did a post about it a couple of years back, and I said, "Why are you pushing your kids to have these fights and to do all these things for what? Who gives a shit who the toughest 13-year-old is?"
Nobody can. And as we've said, Tom, the majority of them get burned out. They stop training at 16, 17 years of age.
Don't they? It's like the quote that's always thrown in MMA: "It's not who's best, it's who's left." None left, are they, after that time?
They're not, mate. We got a kids team. We got a kids jiu-jitsu team and an MMA team. We force no child. our kids program is you don't even have to compete. Every year you'll come to our grading and we'll promote the kids because it's about enjoyment, seeing a bit of progression in my mind.
I do think that's important. Them grading, we have a grading system and we give them pressure, and I created it because I was like, I'm not bothered about you fighting, but I want you to have pressure that you might fail.
Yeah.
And you know, I wouldn't put you in there if I thought you were going to fail, but I want you to think that you might fail.
Yeah, spot on. Yeah.
That's important.
We keep a record now. They've got to have attended X amount of classes to qualify, because I do think commitment is a big thing on their part as well.
Oh, yeah.
But at the same time, like some of the most successful juniors we got coming through now at 16, 17 weren't like Jack was an example, not competing in MMA as young kids and teenagers.
I had my first my
17,
first no headshot
16?
fight at 17. I don't think I actually did a unified amateur fight until 19.
18,
and
19.
Then by 24, I was in the
You've
UFC.
been training since you were little, though.
Yeah.
Since I was 6. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right, isn't it? What? Imagine putting all that pressure on someone.
Yeah. You know, the kid has got to want to.
Compete.
As Jack says, a lot of the parents are pushing. But then at the same time, we got parents that are saying, I want my kid to compete. And our philosophy is you can't compete unless you're training 5 days a week for MMA. You've got to show me you're serious and committed. We'll give you 100% if you give us 100%. If you want to compete, we'll support you 100%. If you don't want to compete, that's cool. No problem. No worries at all. You're not thought of as any less. But don't tell me you want to compete if you're not going to put the training in. But also don't tell me your child wants to compete when I know deep down the child doesn't want to compete. That's you as a father is pushing that
Another problem
that process
with the kids I find as well is, again, go back to the parents. They look at the amateur scene or the pro scene, the UFC scene, and you know, they have this illusion of, well, if he's the best at his weight class, he'll win this title and he'll win that title. But as we all know, kids develop at different rates as well. You know, one 14-year-old who weighs 40 kilo might be a lot less physically developed than another 14-year-old that weighs 40 kilo. And you know, I was one of them kids. I was a little fat kid. If you had chucked me in at my weight at 16 for an MMA fight against a lad who was the same age and weight, he probably would have been 5 inches taller, ripped with a six-pack, and I would have been a little fat kid. But like you say, it doesn't always necessarily then translate to success as a junior. I don't think translates to success as an adult, as an amateur, as a pro.
Well, it obviously doesn't. You're like the obvious marker for it.
Yeah.
Your success, the level that you've achieved, of how good you are, to then you're saying that when you were 16, you did, you know, you were this. You're literally the proof of it. It's like stop putting your kids in to make them hate doing what they're doing. Like, because it's hard, isn't it, martial arts? And I always say, like, a lot of parents will say, oh, he doesn't want to do it anymore. And I'm like, he's going to, because I don't want to do it some days and I love it. But I'd rather play on the Xbox, or I'd rather do something else, or watch a TV show or a film. Things are always going to get in the way. It's always hard, but we've got to sort of build up knowing that life has to be a bit difficult, doesn't it? We have to push through them things.
And that comes from the mindset side of things, which you're an expert in, Tom.
Yeah.
I want to touch on that. So, like, me and Jack have both read your book. Both of us have spoken numerous times. We've both taken a huge amount from it. And I'm not saying that blow smoke up your ass because you're with us. That's genuine. You know, I messaged you at the time, didn't I? Once I finished reading it, it was a big thing. And Jack, I'll tell you this, I messaged you straight away and I said, you've got to read this book. And I bought him the book to read. So you've become really successful, mate, really well known for, I suppose, mindset therapy. Would that be the correct term for it?
Well, it's the personal development, really. It's about developing yourself. And
can you talk about that? How you became, you know, because I noticed, I think I was right in saying, didn't you do the England rugby team, and you've done different corporate companies as well? You're doing as well alongside martial arts. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Tom?
Yeah. So all my life has always been about development. Obviously, martial arts, philosophy led me to Eastern philosophies, Taoism and Buddhism and these things, which led me then into the more Western type, like Stoicism. And Stoicism became a big part. It's quite heavily featured in the book. It's quite prevalent in Fearless by Design. And then from that, it led me into a lot of personal development, what's known as personal or self-development, and understanding that we are in charge of what we do. Now, I sort of lost that way a little bit when I was fighting, and for a few years I didn't involve myself in my studies the same. But then afterwards I really went back into it heavily, and as I was coaching a lot more, I started to read more and more and more all the time, and to study success, really. Then I ended up obviously I was writing the book. The book took me a long time to write. I wrote it by hand and transferred it onto my computer. I got rid of it by hand, put it on the computer, and my son had spilt a drink, or someone had spilt a drink onto my laptop. At the time, I didn't have a cloud thing, so I'd lost the book.
Oh no.
But like I talk about in the book, I'm More Fatty, it was like a blessing in disguise because I hadn't, it weren't anywhere near to the quality of the book that it is now, I'm sure. So I had to remember what I'd wrote and then redo it and restructure it, and it worked out great. But so I'd been doing that for a very long time. And I started doing a lot of the public speaking and coaching development wise in like 2017 or so, doing parts, 2018. And it just grew from there. And I started getting asked to go to a lot of events and give certain keynotes on certain development stuff, certain mindset stuff. And it just grew from that really. And then now it's more what I get paid a lot more. I do a lot of like sort of private coaching things and courses for men and women who are sort of struggling a little bit in their lives with they're successful, but they feel empty, and it's like giving them plans and structure in place for what's missing. I end up putting a lot on social media. Like one of my key rules is taken from Marcus Aurelius, which is never be overheard complaining, not even to yourself. And like we were talking about Conor McGregor, I would see people's social media and the stuff I was watching, I was complaining about. And I was saying, this is pathetic. What kind of example is this setting to kids? And it's all about money and thinking that when you get that car, you'll feel great. When you do this, you'll be great. Treat people like shit. And I was complaining. I thought, I don't want my son to emulate these kind of people because these people are really lost. They don't know, but they're just putting fake things on. They're pretending that they're successful and they're living in Dubai, but they're renting an apartment there, renting a Lamborghini and filming all this content, pretending that they're super successful. And now everyone sees lack. They look on them social media sites and these young kids, they're going, why have I not got that? Why am I not successful like this? And it's like, that isn't success. That's lies. And I was complaining. And then I thought, well, instead of me breaking my number one rule of never be overheard complaining, let me alter the landscape here and I'll put out my stuff for free and I'll give people this content that I know so that I can help these youngsters, because a lot of these people are going off and doing things that we can't get them back from, you know, because they get into that point of speaking to themselves so bad, having this self-talk that's so negative. And it started to become something that I thought I need to be on top of this, because if I'm not, you know, it only takes one person to see it and maybe it makes that change that day. And that was like one of the biggest catalysts for me to end up going into that world.
What was the feedback like off the book? You know, like obviously I couldn't wait to drop you a message when I'd have thought it's probably been similar response from a lot of people that have read it. Have they reached out to you?
Yeah, it's been amazing. It was, you know, I was fortunate. It was a best-selling book. It hit the top of quite a few lists. And it's from word of mouth, really. And I weren't sure how it would be taken because just because of who I was, you know, but I ended up getting another couple of publishing houses reach out to me and say, like, they thought that they were extremely surprised with the quality of the book and what it gave. And then I probably get messages pretty much every day off someone saying how impactful it was and how they've used it. I had some young girl message the other day saying that my mum's reading your book again at the minute. She's read it 3 times and used it to get this job interview, and she used all the methods in it. And, you know, so it's like really nice when I get messages like that. It's really, really good, you know, and it's very, very rare I ever get any negative input. Not that would bother me either.
To be honest, I don't think there's anything that, you know, anything negative could come from anyone that's read. You know, you took a lot out from it.
No, yeah, I told a lot of the boys in the gym about it, and I said, especially if you're because obviously the beauty of it for me was reading how you related to your fighting and how your experiences through fighting led to some certain mindset changes. And for me, obviously, as a fighter, there's a lot I could relate to in it, which I think is why I enjoyed it so much. I was telling a couple of youngsters down the gym, like, to get an 18, 19-year-old to read a book these days it takes a lot. But there's so much. My only regret was not reading it sooner.
Yeah.
I wish I'd read it. Wish I'd found something like it years ago and been able to take it on when I was sort of coming up, and because it would have made me change a lot of things about myself then as well. But obviously, is there a part 2 in the works? Is there a different book totally together being worked
First
on?
off, I'll be clipping that. I'll be clipping you saying that and using
You're moving along, yeah.
someone of your caliber saying that. But
you'll be playing that on repeat now. You
yeah. So I'm currently writing the last couple of years. I've been writing the new book. I've been writing the new book. It's different than Fearless by Design. I have quite a few books ready. What I wanted to do. It's similar in that it's about understanding success, really, so that you can. There's like a saying that's used a lot: success leaves clues, and it's about all the people that I've coached and all the people I've been fortunate enough to see, and then all the things that I've read about is what makes them successful, and then this is going to be it. So I haven't released anything yet, but that's like 3/4 of the way done.
No, I look forward to it because I'm a big advocate of the mental side of it. You can have the most skillful, technical athlete in the world, but if he's a little bit weak in the mind, he's going to fold on those big occasions. Some of the toughest kids we got in the gym are not naturally gifted, not naturally talented. Jackson first to say, not the most naturally gifted athleticism, but his mindset was bulletproof. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's so important, not just in martial arts or in life.
Especially I think modern day with social media.
Definitely.
You match a kid up in the gym. What's the first thing they do? They take the guy's name and go and do a deep dive for his social media, and next thing you know, they think they're in there with a John Jones or a Conor McGregor.
We had a young lad, didn't we? He's like, we've got him he's wanted a fight. We've got him a fight, and then he's like, no, I'm not fighting him. He's white belt world sambo, British sambo champion. And it's like, right, don't want to fight. But that's a mindset, and this is a skillful kid,
And your own mind, obviously you speak about in the book, can be a great tool to have if you can control your mind, but obviously it can be a massive detriment as well if you don't know how to get on top of it.
I agree.
Like you said, we've seen so many fighters who I know personally, and so many you see, even in the UFC, like elite level fighters who, as good as they are, you see they've got a little chink in the armor where when the going gets tough, they do sort of look for a way out. And I think if they can take on certain methods to train the mind as much as, I think if most fighters train their mind as much as they train their body, you'd see an entire different set of results again.
I think Tom would be an advocate of that, wouldn't he?
I think like looking back on my career, it's like I can see, like I talk about in the book, and in the new book, I talk about some other things similar. And it's like I'm very open about when I hindered myself, when I got in my own way, why I didn't achieve the things. Like on a skill set level, I'm, without sounding arrogant, I've not really met that many people who had my kind of ability on martial arts, but yet I got in my own way with so many behaviors and different ways in my thought process, and it was my fault. It's no one else's fault. Like, people are quick to point fingers. Like, I could say the Wolf Slayer was super hard. Well, it was, but I was ultimately in charge of what I did.
Yeah.
And
I think, fighting short-lived, isn't it? Most guys have, particularly a successful MMA fighter, they're retired mid-30s now, the majority of them. But the mindset follows you through life, doesn't it? Like, the biggest testament I had, like when I was ill, is I think my mindset got me through it. I was going back and forth this hospital, seeing people that were rolling over and dying. And the doctor used to say to me all the time, it's your mindset. She couldn't believe like my thought processes and my approach to dealing with the treatment and getting better. And we've spoke about it loads of time. I just think my mental toughness and my mindset of, you're going to have to kill me before you'll beat me, got me through the illness. So that was a massive factor for me, was all the skills and all the experiences I had built up over 30 years helped me get through that 12 months, which was the worst in my life. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I think I've been being optimistic as well. And there's something like called pronoia, which is the reverse of paranoia. So paranoia is that you think everyone's against you and that everything's against you and it's hard and there's people doing these things. But pronoia is you think that the universe is on your side and you're going to succeed. And I think having that kind of mind frame is key, really, to not even for fighting, just for enjoying your life, just to be blessed and to have that gratitude that you think, do you know what, life is really good. There's a lot of good people in the world that want me to succeed and that I want to succeed. And that's a much better view.
Totally agree.
I think taking that kind of mindset and knowing I'm not just going to roll over and, like, you're an inspiration, mate, aren't you, for what you went through? I'm sure a lot of people don't know, but that's massive. And obviously, like you're saying, mindset is the key because a lot of people fucking don't.
No, a lot. My mindset was, well, I got my wife, I got my kids. Jack had just told me that I had a grandchild on the way. There was so many positive things that, and I've said this from day one, it sounds a bit bleak, but I'm not afraid of dying, but I'm afraid of what I would have left behind in that situation. It's not my time yet. It was too young. A lot of them would have struggled, I think, dealing with it at that time of their lives. So for me, it was about focusing on all the like my tattoo says, during your darkest moments, you must focus to see the light. And I read that when I was ill, and I've lived my life by it ever since.
Yeah.
On that, I think we've covered everything.
Yeah, that was a good way to end it.
Good way to end it. Do you want to tell people where they can get the book, Tom?
Yeah, you get it on Amazon, Fearless by Design, or you can head to my site, tomblackledge.com, and you'll get all the info on my coaching and books and events and things like that.
And if anybody's looking to train with you, do you want to say where your gym is? Give the address.
Yeah, right at Blueprint Academy in Wigan. If they want to come and do some jiu-jitsu or train MMA and that, there's a whole.
We'll put these links up on.
We'll get a link for the book in the bio anywe. Tom, thanks very much for your time.
We appreciate you're a busy man, mate, and I really enjoyed this. I got to be honest.
Tell Yayan we're eagerly awaiting his return. So
any news? Any news of a date?
I'm hoping really soon. So him fighting for that Cage Warriors title and
can't be far off.
He's a perfect example, Tom, of somebody that I'd say I could see Tom BlackLedge has coached this kid, just the way he carries himself, his skill set, and also he's a cracking lad. And he's come down and trained with us, and he was respectful. He trained hard. He was a testament to yourself, mate.
Yeah, he's a lovely kid. I'm very close with you. He performs exceptional when he's out, does as he's told, sticks to what he needs to stick to, does everything like as a coach could ask. So, hopefully he gets to keep he has been impressing on Cage Warriors, hasn't he?
Oh, yes. Very good. Very, very good.
I'm glad he had his brown belt, though. So I remember when he come to the gym and told me he's a purple belt. Like, you're fucking sandbagging with that purple belt.
Black guys sending all his purple belts out to kill all the black belts. Don't worry, I know the game.
Right, Tom, thank you very much.
Thank you, my man. Appreciate it. Take care, bud.
See you later.
Good up, pal.
Bye-bye.